quick recap of what's going on up here in Canada. Mark Carney is currently attempting to pass bills C8 and C9, the most extreme anti-free speech bills that have been seen in the West, more extreme than the so-called Online Safety Act that they passed in the UK under Keir Starmer, another globalist puppet that's seeing approximately 12,000 British citizens arrested a year for social media posts or social media comments. The UK now leads the world in terms of speech arrests, entire planet. And Bill C8 and C9 are more extreme versions of the Online Safety Act. Bill C9 would give any MP the power to unilaterally cut your internet service. Whether you're using Rogers, Bell, whatever service provider you have, an MP without any interpretation from the AG doesn't have to be involved whatsoever, which is another change to the law. Your internet service can be permanently cut. They don't like what you're posting. I'm already seeing conservative commentators. I got cut with 30,000 followers off of TikTok. I think a lot of people who criticize Canadian immigration policy and say that bringing in the equivalent of British Columbia every 4 years to this country at the same time as $85 billion have left the country since Mark Carney was elected. The Canadian economy is getting worse, and we know that bringing in the equivalent of British Columbia every 4 years is a major contributor to that. Youth male unemployment is 22%. Real unemployment, they say it's 7.1%, which would be the second highest in the G7, but in all likelihood, it's actually a substantially higher number than that when you consider all the people that have dropped out of the workforce. And just the math doesn't make any sense. We have a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, but at the same time, they're inviting 1.5 million people into the country when they're only targeting building 220,000 houses. It makes no sense. So what the government of Canada is saying is they know their opinions are incredibly unpopular. They have state propaganda outlets that will never challenge them on anything like the CBC. But what they're now going to do with C8 and C9 is start arresting people who criticize the government, which is what commies always do. They let the criminals roam free. The Supreme Court of Canada, for those who haven't seen, the Supreme Court of Canada just axed minimum mandatory 1-year prison sentences for having CP on your computer, the most hideous crime you could ever imagine. Well, at the same time, passing Bill C8, which states that if you are convicted of a so-called hate speech infraction, you can be imprisoned for up to life. So minimum mandatory 1-year prison sentence for having CP, the most heinous crime you could possibly commit. They axed that while at the same time announcing speech laws where you can face up to lifetime in prison for what you say online. It's woke tyranny. They dress it up with this pretty veneer, and anybody who can't see fundamentally that if they go after your free speech, eventually those who criticize, Carney is looting this country. Brookfield Asset Management is up 45%, signed an $80 billion deal with the states. His personal assets are up monstrously. He claims to have a blind trust, but it's not a blind trust anyway. The man knows exactly where his investments are, and it's been documented time after time after time that he's violated the Conflict of Interest Act while he's been Prime Minister, advocating for companies that we know he has a personal financial stake in from his podium as Prime Minister, a clear violation of the Conflict of Interest Act. But these things never get prosecuted. The RCMP is in their pocket. There's so much money laundering. Can you imagine the $22 billion sent to Ukraine? How much of that gets laundered? Why is Chrystia Freeland in the Ukraine meeting with Zelensky? Is she working in any capacity? What's the relationship there? But we're soon going to be living in a country where people don't think of it with the West, but in the UK, They are literally arresting. They are arresting 12,000 people a year for things that they post and sentencing them to lengthy prison sentences. And the Canadian government's takeaway from that is, hey, we have some wildly unpopular policies. So you know what we're going to do? Rather than hash it out, rather than have a debate about things, we are going to criminalize criticism when we loot the country. Yeah, we'll see. Carney left question period early yesterday, so we'll see where he's at today. Please like, share, subscribe, join, become a member, donate, grab some gear. Appreciate it.